Good evening, everybody. My name's Peter Gray. I'm the chair of the Bike Maryland Board of Directors, and this is the Bike Maryland 2024 legislative recap. We're going to go over some things that happened in the session and a little bit of analysis and maybe talk a little bit about what we will do in 2025. So you see our mission: promote bicycling, increase safety, improve conditions, and provide a voice for bicyclists in Maryland. We are 100% volunteers. We work with advocacy organizations such as Washington Area Bicyclists Association, Bike AAA, Bike HOCO, and a few others. We also work with state and local government agencies, universities, businesses, and communities to make biking a safe form of transportation, and most of all, a fun recreational opportunity for all. We spend a lot of time advocating in Annapolis for stronger state bicycling policies and legislation. This year's legislative session ended on Monday, April 8th. There are several bills that we supported that passed both chambers and have been signed by Governor Moore. So before the session started, December 23, we set priorities on what bills we wanted to offer to the legislature. We met with potential bill sponsors. We encouraged all of them to pre-file before the session started. And we also sent a budget priorities letter to Governor Moore and the Secretary of Transportation, Wiedefeld. During this time, we basically signaled our intentions to some legislators and sort of engaged in a process of trying to get as many things ready for presentation to both the House and the Senate before the session started. As you're all probably very well aware, the session is very short and time is always of the essence. I think there's something like 8,000 bills got presented to legislative committees this last session. So here's some timelines for every session, how it rolled out in 2024. You can see the most important things were on the 5th, there was a deadline to introduce any sort of bill into the Senate, and on the 9th for the House. And we always have our bike symposium, second or third week in Annapolis, and we had 125 people come and go visit their legislators and press for the bills that we were asking to be passed. March 18th is a very important day because, as it's denoted crossover day, if a bill has not passed either the Senate or the House, it's basically a dead letter for the rest of the sessions. And then Sine Die, I think is how the British pronounce it, is the last day of the legislative session at midnight on April 8th of this last year. So we had 5 bills that we designated as priorities that were passed and signed by the governor, 3 that passed only in the House, and 4 that did not pass either chamber. The ones that were passed and signed by Governor Moore, you have the Sarah Debig Langenkamp Memorial Act, you have the Vision Zero Coordinator, you have the Better Bus Service Act, and there were 2 bills that were local bills, one in Prince George's and one in Anne Arundel counties. This bill was named for Sarah Debig Langenkamp, who was killed while riding her bike in a bike lane on River Road in Bethesda. And the end result of that for her family, given the law at the time when this happened in 2022, was that the driver of the truck who hit her was given a fine and pretty much nothing else. The way the law is now changed by this bill is that it enhances penalties for drivers who either injure or kill a cyclist in a bike facility, matching the penalties for drivers who hit people walking in crosswalks. And it can be up to 2 months in prison. So there is some liberty loss that is available now as a remedy for the families of victims. The main thing that we wanted to sort of make a point that when somebody is on a bike and is killed by a car, that we wanted there to be a more robust and sort of strong response by the criminal justice system. That it wouldn't just be a slap on the wrist, that people would actually, drivers would actually suffer some real consequence. And so that's what was accomplished by passage of this bill. The Vision Zero Advisory Coordinator, this requires MDOT to appoint a Vision Zero coordinator to collaborate with SHA and various other state agencies and local authorities. It also mandates that they hold quarterly public meetings and that that the state now has somebody who oversees the implementation of Vision Zero in Maryland, advising the governor and the state agencies, and as said before, holding these quarterly meetings, notes taken, etc. The Better Bus Service Act wasn't really a bike bill, although there were some more specifically related bicycle related parts of the bill that were taken out during the legislative process. But this allows traffic enforcement of vehicles that are stopping, standing, or parking in bus-only lanes, which bikes may also use. So that's a positive thing, and it basically prohibits those activities and allows for monitoring automatic traffic enforcement with cameras on the buses. Then there were two local bills that that I mentioned earlier. Number one was this Prince George's stop sign monitoring. So there are, hundreds of stop signs in Prince George's County, and this would allow the county to place automated traffic enforcement cameras at stop signs in school zones. And so how the county rolls this out, is not clear, but it's enabling legislation, so it allows the county to do this even on state roads. And then there's the Anne Arundel speed limit bill, which allows the county, after doing a traffic study, to lower speed limits to 15 miles an hour. And prior to this, I think the lowest they could go was 25. So that will make certain streets safer in Anne Arundel because obviously the faster a car is going, when they hit somebody, a vulnerable road user, like somebody walking or biking or in a wheelchair, faster they're going, the more likely it is to be deadly. So lowering speed limits is something that we are pushing for in many different contexts. And this bill allows Anne Arundel County to lower its speed limits, but only after doing a traffic study. Now, there were three bills that we were advocating for that only passed the House of Delegates and did not get votes in the relevant Senate committee, the Judicial Proceedings Committee. This is Bikes on Sidewalks, Bicycle Safety Yield, and the Transportation and Climate Alignment Act. And the question is, why did these bills stall in the Senate? And I'll get to that in a little bit. So bikes on sidewalks. The way that the law is right now, anybody who wants to bike on a sidewalk legally can only do that if the local jurisdiction has actually passed a law that legalizes biking on the sidewalks. And it may be all over that jurisdiction, only in certain geographic places. What this would do is it would, if it was passed by and signed, it would flip that default so that biking on sidewalks would be legal statewide. So make that the default statewide, and then local jurisdictions could decide to restrict that, say, don't allow it in the central business district in a certain county or city. And one of the main reasons for us wanting to push this is because there are disproportionate policing impacts for people of color who are riding their bikes on the sidewalks. And they're riding their bikes on the sidewalks because it's dangerous to ride on the streets a lot of times. So we made a lot of progress with this. We got every vote except 2 in the House. But again, the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee did not vote on the bill. And this is a good example of why many bills take 2 years or more to pass through the legislature. Then there's bicycle safety yield, or as it's known in some other places, stop as yield, or Idaho stop, because Idaho was the first state to pass such a law. This would allow bikes to do what they can do legally in 11 states and the District of Columbia, which is to treat stop signs as yield signs. And what that does is instead of having, when you're on your bike and you get to a stop sign, having to stop, get off your bike, and then start up again, which is all we all know is kind of a slow process, it allows the cyclist who's going pretty slow to begin with to evaluate what the intersection looks like, and if nobody is either making a left turn in front of them or going on the street perpendicular, that the bike can continue to roll on through the intersection and stay ahead of the cars behind them, and therefore be more visible. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration has published guidance on this, endorsing such an idea for states to pass laws. And as I said, 11 other states and DC now have those laws. So when I'm riding my bicycle in Montgomery County, I'm supposed to stop, come to a dead stop at every stop sign. But when I'm in DC, it's much more comfortable for me and safer for me because I can stay ahead of the cars using my judgment at each intersection. Then there was a bill, Transportation and Climate Alignment Act, which is something that was endorsed by Sierra Club and other environmental groups. And this would require the Department of Transportation and regional planning agencies to measure and mitigate any sort of increased climate pollution and vehicle miles traveled caused by highway expansion projects over $50 million. So if a highway expansion project over that dollar amount is going to take place, before it goes through, the planning agencies and the Department of Transportation have to measure and mitigate how much increase in vehicle miles traveled that project will cost, and then to engage in mitigation strategies such as those that are listed on the slide here, enhancing transit access, building protected bike infrastructure, expanding remote work options, locating jobs and amenities near residential housing, all sorts of policies that we think are good ones to have. And again, this is something that, like those other 2 bills, passed overwhelmingly in the House and did pass out of the Senate Finance Committee, but didn't pass and passed a second reading in the Senate, but ran out of time to receive a third vote before the end of the session. And we're very encouraged by this having good prospects in the legislature next year. But talking about the first 2 bills, the bikes on sidewalks and bike safety yield, there was a bit of a holdup in the Judicial Proceedings Committee. And even though the bills were introduced relatively early in the legislative session, they never ever got a vote in that committee. Now we're hoping that will be different next year, but it just shows you that there's a lot of different pitfalls and missteps that can take place during the legislative session, and that we need to do better, especially in getting things through the Senate. And then there were bills that we were hoping for passage of that did not pass either chamber. And this was the Great Maryland Trails Act, an e-bike rebate program, and the Maryland Transportation Authority building that would have basically applied a complete streets policy to the MDTA or MTA rather, that deals with bridges and tunnels. The Great Maryland Trails Act, we had a lot of hope for because at the Bike Symposium in 2023, we started an effort with Senator Sarah Elfreth to draft this bill that would create a state trails office, would have that office create an inventory of current trails, create a plan for a statewide trail network, and create a Maryland Trails Advisory Commission, all with the under the aegis of the Department of Transportation and the Department of Natural Resources, which of course has a lot of trails in its parks. As I said, we began these discussions in February of 23. We had discussions with the main agencies. We got support from Mid-Atlantic Off-Road Enthusiasts, the Mountain Bike Group, East Coast Greenway, Eastern Shore Trail Advocates, and the Rails to Trails Conservancy. And we got bills cross-filed in both the Senate and House prior to the session, but for various reasons, neither version got voted on in their committees. And then the Transportation Authority Pedestrian Bike Safety, this is something that would apply to the MDTA, which is the agency that has control of all the tunnels and bridges in the state. And it would have repealed the prohibition for having facilities for people walking and biking, mostly on those bridges, and would have required MDTA to build separated bike ped infrastructure on certain MDTA structure. Now, this bill was inspired by the debacle relating to the Nice Bridge, which is a bridge that connects southern Maryland to Virginia. There was a promise that Governor Hogan made to put a separated facility on that new bridge that was being constructed for, I think, hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the sort of, to us, the last minute, the Secretary of Transportation reneged on that promise and said that there would be no separated facility. And in fact, moved rather expeditiously to destroy the old bridge before the Moore administration could take over and possibly save it. So this is again something that we have some hopes for in the future. And, you know, the Key Bridge is going to be something that is unfortunately going to have to be rebuilt. Eventually, the Bay Bridge is going to have to be rebuilt. And we want to make it so that people walking and biking will be able to use those bridges instead of having to rely solely on cars. E-bike rebates. There have been very, very successful, wildly successful programs, especially in the city of Denver, had a $500,000 e-bike rebate program. The District of Columbia has a $100,000 program that is basically going to kick in this year and next. This bill would have created a program to subsidize the purchase of e-bikes focused on lower income residents, and it was a fairly modest allocation of $100,000, and it wouldn't have started until fiscal year 2026, which is, you know, July of 2025. This bill did not get voted on in the committee, basically because of the budget situation in the state. At the beginning of the session, it was basically announced that there was a $3 billion transportation budget deficit for the next 6 years, and therefore anything that had a price tag was not going to have great prospects for passing. And so that's why this bill did not make any progress. Then there was the State Road Trail and Sidewalk Maintenance. This is a bit in the weeds, but currently it is statutory law that MDOT-SHA, the State Highway Administration, is not allowed to maintain facilities that are within its right of way, but outside the curb to curb. So we're talking about trails or side paths, even sidewalks that are put in anew cannot be put in, even if SHA pays for the construction. They can be put in, but SHA is legally prohibited from funding the maintenance of those projects. And so there are certain counties that are not going forward with projects that are within the SHA right of way because they don't have the money to maintain those facilities. And this law would have at least opened up a discussion between the state and the local jurisdictions as to how maintenance of a facility could be paid for. And again, this is something we hope can make more progress next year. So just to sort of give you a little bit of overview, and you've sort of heard me talk about these committees, or at least judicial proceedings. The main committees that hear bike ped bills are the Environmental and Transportation Committee, or ENT. The chair is Mark Corman. Vice chair is Regina Boyce. Mark Corman's in Montgomery County. Regina Boyce is in Baltimore City. And then there's the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, which the chair is Will Smith in D20 in Tacoma Langley, and Jeff Waldstreicher, who covers parts of Bethesda, Chevy Chase, and Silver Spring. So what's next? Again, Bike Maryland, in concert with some of the local advocacy organizations and advocates, will create a list of bills next year. We are interested in hearing from you guys as to what some of those ideas might be. We will probably resubmit some of the bills from the 2024 session, like bike safety yield and bikes on sidewalks. We will have discussions this summer and fall with key legislatures on the ENT and JPR committees. And we will enlist, say, for instance, with the Trails Act, support from the Department of Transportation, Department of Natural Resources, and MDTA, which, as I said before, has sway over bridges and tunnels. And during the legislative session, we have meetings on Monday nights, which are available to any advocate to join. And we talk about the ins and outs and the process of where the bills are during the session. We will put stuff on social media. We will meet with climate activists to try and strengthen that partnership. We'll meet with the mountain bike leadership to discuss shared priorities, and we'll have a more inclusive approach than we have had in the past. And then here are some resources, and we will circulate the slideshow to you all and to anybody who wants it. If people want to raise their hands or sort of signal that they want to talk, and Dan Barron, who's on the board, is being my technical advisor here, and he will facilitate you asking questions if you have them.
Thanks. Richard Hoy from Bethesda. This presentation raises quite a number of questions that I have about a more holistic and proactive approach to legislation in Maryland. One issue that, in particular, that wasn't mentioned that I think is fundamentally important to the bike community is the contributory negligence policy in the state, and an approach to or a campaign to reverse that to the status that is in what 46 other states, which has comparative negligence. There was, according to my information, Delegate Chow from Northern Montgomery and I think Howard County participated in some task force to study this issue. I know nothing more about what focus has been on that issue in Annapolis, so maybe you could inform us and talk about a collaborative approach with other stakeholders, because it's a hot button issue that we could make to overturn this policy.
So thank you for that question, Richard. So for people who aren't as much in the weeds as say Richard and I and a couple others on this call, basically, if you are riding your bike, say you're riding in a bike lane, and you sort of swerve a little bit, but then go back in the bike lane, and then a car comes along and hits you, injures you, kills you, whatever. In any sort of civil suit against the driver, even if a court, a fact finder would to conclude that your fault, your portion of the fault is 1 or 2%, and the driver is 98% at fault, your 1 or 2% would preclude you in a contributory negligence state from recovering at all. Whereas in the other 46 states, outside of, I think it's North Carolina, Alabama, Maryland, and one other, you would have a comparative negligence finding, and therefore you'd get 98% of whatever that recovery would be. There have been efforts. I think there was an effort in 2018 by Senator Susan Lee, who's now the Secretary of State, to try and reverse this. That was unsuccessful. The District of Columbia created a carve-out or exemption from the contributory negligence doctrine for crashes involving vulnerable road users. So if you are involved in a crash in the District of Columbia, it's a comparative negligence situation, and you would get some recovery. But in Maryland, you'd get nothing if it's found that you have any sort of hint of fault. We did have a discussion recently with some legislators about this, and that one office is sort of looking at this and sort of trying to figure out what is the thing that DC did. Is that something we can do in Maryland? We have contacts with a trial lawyers group, a plaintiffs group that is interested in this. And there are other sort of non-bike groups that are interested in this, just sort of as a matter of social justice. So it may be that a bill will be offered up for the next legislative session, but that's sort of the status of discussions right now. But it is something that we are talking about.
And I have allowed everyone to unmute themselves. So if you have a question, feel free to just raise your hand so we can keep track of who's interested, and feel free to ask a question.
Yeah, Jessica.
Hi there. I'm from Calvert County. I just have a question about the Vision Zero Advisory Coordinator bill. Can you just speak a little bit more about that? I guess it's a new position that's now required from MDOT. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, and basically, there is a towards zero death policy that's an official state policy. But nobody has been in charge of the effort. So you know, this is a step forward. We are hoping that whoever's appointed to this position will be able to have enough support from MDOT and other state agencies. This is something that the police will get involved with, that SHA will get involved with, that MDTA and MTA will get involved with. And hopefully that effort will mean that by putting some more public light on this in the form of those quarterly meetings, that some progress will be made towards strengthening that Vision Zero policy. What the bill did not do is it didn't say you should spend $100 million on this or any dollar amount. And so other than sort of appointing the coordinator, it doesn't mandate a certain staffing level or anything like that. And so this is really just a very small step, but an important step. And at least that will give advocates sort of an address, as you were, for where to go with ideas, complaints, suggestions to enhance whatever state policies are aimed towards reaching that goal of zero deaths due to crashes. Did I, is that sufficient? I mean, is there more you're interested in, Jessica?
Yeah, no, we recently updated our strategic highway safety plan locally, and I guess I was just trying to figure out what is the difference between the highway safety office that we work with now and that position versus what is, I guess, being asked for. But I think, sure, it's a step forward. Perhaps, I guess I will be on the lookout to see what
Right.
else is.
What comes of it?
Yeah.
You and us both. Where do
Okay.
you live?
Calvert County.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that if you're if the group you're working with in Calvert has ideas and wants to sort of have Bike Maryland amplify those and talk to other people, you should contact us. My email isn't in the slideshow, but it's chair, CHAIR, at bikemd.org. And you can find that on the website too. But yeah, no, I think this is a TBD kind of situation, and we'll see, where it goes from here and who's appointed and what kind of support they get from MDOT and other agencies.
Thank you.
Doug had a comment in the chat that Dr. Tim Kearns is currently the director for the Vision Zero coordinator, and that this is bringing more transparency to a lot of work that's already being done. And then Joe had a question in the chat, which was, Peter, what do we know about the opposition in the Senate? Many senators or one or two?
Basically, I mean, my perception of the committee is that the Democrats on the committee are relatively supportive. We had both the chair and the vice chair sponsoring bills on our behalf. There are a couple of Republicans that are have some opposition to policies that would enhance cycling. I'm not quite sure why. And I think we're going to try and target at least one of them to enlist some of their constituents and have a meeting with that senator or senators and see if we can at least reduce the amount of opposition that they have, if not turn them into supporters. So that's something that we are working on and you know, with the local bike group that is in that senatorial district. So I think that we do have, I think, as time goes on, stronger and stronger support from the chair of the committee, you know, as well as the vice chair. And I think that we will have a strategy going forward where we're much, much more conscious of making sure that bills are pre-filed in the Senate so that they get the earliest possible Senate committee hearing, so that it's less likely that things will just sort of run out of time towards the end of the session.
Jessica had a comment that the Maryland code requires state to maintain or reconstruct sidewalks located within an area designated as a PFA or at least share funding. And then Richard has his hand up for a question.
Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, the work that you know, I'm glad that Bike Maryland's doing this work, and what I'd like to see is a long range plan that has over multi years, that has because as you say, you know, it may take several attempts to get a bill passed. I'd see a long range plan developed, and Bike Maryland gave a great presentation. David Moon, Delegate Moon, gave a great presentation to Bike Maryland before the beginning of the session last year on the legislative process. I thought it was very valuable. It might be a good idea to do that again and earlier, like, you know, now or over the summer. And in his presentation, I came away understanding that that legislation really should be put in the process, at least at the county level, where the state county delegations work, as soon as possible. Talking about September, August, September. So, what I'd like to know is, you know, what is the optimum time to have some legislative ideas and language crafted for introduction, not, you know, not the statutory time, but the optimum time. And I guess I'll ask a second question here. I see that the state has great power of its budget, and I'd like to see an effort evaluated, you know, to make the state-funded universities and schools and state institutions in general adopt bicycle-friendly policies, and in the case of universities and schools, meet and exceeds the standards in the League of American Bicyclists bike-friendly campus program. You know, requiring that initial evaluation, and then requiring these institutions to advance in achievement over a specific time. So I'll end there. Thanks.
So the first part, I would respond like this. One of the things that we are starting to think about as Bike Maryland is how can we effectively engage in some of the local jurisdictions with regards to infrastructure and budget for infrastructure what we're being told at the state level, to some degree, is that the state agencies are not going to be supporting any sort of projects that aren't already endorsed on a local level. So I know that you're very aware of the process by which Montgomery County ranks projects. There's priority letters that I think every jurisdiction does to one degree or another. And if something isn't on the top, 2 or 3 of that list for a local jurisdiction, the state is less likely to fund a specific project. Right now, the budget situation is so dire that even the legislation that we were pushing for, we tried to minimize the budgetary impact everywhere that we could. And so, because basically we are being told, the committee chairs are being told by the leadership in the House and the Senate that anything that had a fiscal note or a budget impact would be considered, maybe dead on arrival or maybe very poor prospects of passing. So one sort of angle on this is to get local jurisdictions to support funding specific projects. I would also like to see, and I'm not sure how much progress we'll make on this. We'll have discussions with state officials about it, but the Bikeways program, that is the only state-funded bike ped program, the Kim Lamphere Bikeways program, which basically supports grants for planning on for localities. Right now, that program is a reimbursement program. So any city or county that wants to get that grant has to spend the money up front, execute on the grant, and then get reimbursed. That puts those grants out of reach of many, many jurisdictions in the state. And really, if you're going to give money for planning, then give money for planning and have it not be just a reimbursement kind of situation. The other thing is that we'd like to see that fund be much, much greater than the $4 or $5 million that it currently receives. I think that the suggestion that you have about trying to get legislation to get state-funded universities to meet certain of the bike-friendly community, bike-friendly campus standards that are issued by League of American Bicyclists is a good idea. I'm not sure what the fiscal impacts of that would be, because those will definitely exist. And again, when we're setting out our priorities, one thing that we did sort of realize from last year is that we kind of tried to do too many things at once. But all that is to say, there's a million good ideas out there, and we have to decide on what are the 4 or 5 that are the best that we think have a reasonable chance of success in passing. Of course, that's not where our advocacy stops. We are engaging with officials at SHA and MDOT and DNR. Even though the Trails Act bill didn't pass, something I should have mentioned earlier, there is an effort by MDOT, somewhat in concert with DNR, to set up a trails office in the Secretary of Transportation office. But again, we want something that will be more full-throated than that and will actually be mandated to create a trails plan and to start to fund it. So I don't know if I didn't fully respond, you can tell me, but that's my reaction to your question. Any other questions? Richard?
Sorry for occupying so much time here.
That's okay. Nobody else is asking questions, so.
The issue that was raised here about trails and the trails program coordinator and so on, lack of buy-in by the by various jurisdictions, I see as a real opportunity for Bike Maryland, in that connecting the trails across jurisdictions and sometimes within jurisdictions, that in a way that we could use as a advertising tool in the Department of Tourism, I think is a real opportunity that may change some hearts and minds in these jurisdictions. This would have to be a very focused effort, maybe just one area of the state at a time, at least at first, to make interest in the idea. But the tourism potential of having really well linked trails with facilities, bed and breakfasts, and so on, could be a real driver of tourism in the state, and money talks. And the other thought I have is the use of health impact analysis tool for bicycle and vulnerable user transportation analysis. I'd like to see maybe a pilot program funded through one of our agencies, maybe with discretionary funds, maybe through the Department of Planning in the state, to use that tool and advertise its utility in making policy decisions. It's used for analyzing geographical master plans. It's been used around the country in that way, and it can be used in evaluating road projects. It's already been used that way. So it's a good tool, and it puts an analytic approach to what we advocate for anecdotally. After the design is made, we advocate for giving us a little space or slowing the speed of traffic. Health impact analysis would put in the priorities considered important at the front end, and evaluated to the end, and measuring several outcomes, so we could make a more informed policy decision rather than a political one.
So such impact analyses have been done in the DMV by the Capital Trails Coalition. But again, the impact study did cost, I think, $100,000 or something like that. It wasn't nothing. So I don't know that discretionary funds will really cut it, but I think that, your suggestion of a region by region is not a bad one. I think that, you could focus on, Calvert and other Eastern Shore counties, or you could focus on Garrett and Washington County in Western Maryland, because these are areas that are very already attract a lot of tourist dollars. And the economic benefit for sort of having a very robust trail network in those areas would accrue more in a tourism manner than in a transportation manner. And there are advocates on the Eastern Shore that are interested in this. I don't know if Jessica is still on the call. She could comment on this, but I think the sort of the stumbling block there is sort of that initial impact study money. And again, that's something that would probably be a perfect grant opportunity for the Land Fear Fund. But you know, I think, you know, again, it's a good idea. And if we had money, loose money sitting around, it would be something that would be a relatively low lift. But in the current budget environment, certainly the local jurisdictions are struggling, you know, because of the state struggling. So I think that, again, I hope that the person that I think is going to be put in by in MDOT as a trails coordinator will be, you know, open to ideas like that and trying to find funding resources for those efforts. Well, it's 7:58. I think that I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. As I said, we will circulate the slides to everybody who registered, and we'll put a link to this webinar on the Bike Maryland page. And, you know, if you thought this was helpful, tell other people to spend an hour looking at it. And I will stop sharing my screen. But thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. And again, chair@bikemd.org is my email address. And so feel free to send me inquiries, suggestions, whatever, along the lines that Richard and others have been mentioning here tonight.